Good afternoon. It's time. Okay. We are going to talk about AUB today. You know, as in Cody and Robin Brown, Mary, Janelle, Christine, all the things. I said at 1 o'clock. I waited till 1:05. It was about all I could do to wait that long because I have been so excited for this. So today we are going to be interviewing Melanie. Melanie was brought up in the AUB. Before she jumps on here, and she's going to come on live with me, okay? So when she gets here, we're going to plop her in and we'll start the interview. But before she gets here, are there any questions that you're just dying to know? I have a list and I sent them to her so she could look through them first, because I'm not into, hey, Helen, I'm not into shanking somebody. You know what I mean? And just surprising them with questions. That's not my thing. I just wanted to interview her and get her story, because somehow I came across her page the other day and I was like, this is somebody I need to talk to. And Mary won't talk to me. Mary, I'm still over here waiting. Still here waiting. Mary, quite contrary. I'm still here waiting. Hey, beautiful. Okay, so Melanie's parents joined the AUB when they were young. So early in their marriage, they joined the AUB, and then her father started taking on wives. And then that meant that Melanie was born into it and raised in it. Okay. Now she says she knows the Browns personally. I have not asked her those questions yet as to how and why. Oh, thank you, Helen. That was a lot of fun. I got to tell you, I near about died for days. Sorry, we're flipping subjects. I bought Danielle a cameo from Cody. It pained me to know that money was going in his pocket. It did, y'all. That was the worst thing about it, was I knew that money was going in Cody's pocket. But I got to tell you, days I waited for him to post that. When you buy it, they have 7 days. Hey, Melanie. Okay, I'll join you. They have 7 days to make the cameo. And this man waited 5 or 6. And it made me wonder if he was looking up who we were, which I think would have been really funny. Anyway, so Melanie was brought up in the AUB because her parents joined when they were young. So that meant that's how she was raised. And that was her only expectation. Was, when you're, it's like being raised Catholic, when you're raised Catholic, you just assume you're going to be Catholic when you grow up, right? So let's, add note to self 444, also known as Melanie. Okay. Invitation sent. Thing on your screen that says, okay, accept. Now turn your camera on so we can see you, love bug.
I'm figuring that out. How do I do that?
It's okay. It might take you a little bit. It always does me whenever I invite somebody.
Here we go.
You got it?
Got it.
There she is. Hi, Melanie.
How's it going?
It is wonderful. I'm so glad that you agreed to do this.
Oh, thank you for asking me. I'm not super versed on TikTok, so I'm still learning.
It's okay. That's okay. That's why, I'm not real versed at going live, and people tell me all the time I should go live more often. And I have found it's way more fun if I ask somebody, hey, can I interview you on TikTok? Because I love to talk to people like a conversation, right?
Right.
So this is way more fun for me. I have to fess up and tell you, last night I found your YouTube channel.
Oh, nice.
And so I binged all of last night. I slept with my little earbud in, and every time I'd wake up coughing, I have a cough, so if I start coughing, I'm sorry. And I would roll over and turn the next one on.
Oh, how funny.
And then I re-listened to a couple. So it was fun. And I was just kind of giving, I hope you don't mind, the beginning of your story that you were raised in the AUB because your parents joined when they were young, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so I made the analogy that if you're raised Catholic, you just assume you're going to be Catholic, right?
Absolutely.
So did you always grow up just assuming you would have multiple sister wives and be in that lifestyle?
Yep. And my first husband and I actually courted a couple of girls and dated as if we were going to be polygamous. But then, and I go about that in one of my podcasts, but we actually never did do it. And I had decided at one point that I just didn't want to be a part of that. So Yeah.
Well, so you ended up having 2 children with your first husband, right?
Actually 3.
Oh, you had 3.
Yeah, my third baby is what made me, well, there's a big gap there. There's about a
Okay.
5-year gap there. And I actually ended up getting divorced right after he was born.
So you were married from the time you were 17 and 8 days. How many years?
10. So my anniversary, or my divorce went through on my 10-year anniversary. I thought it was a joke at first when I got the divorce papers and they were stamped. Because we didn't legally get married, I didn't know that we had to get a legal divorce. So when Mary talks about on the Sister Wives that she was going to get a release, that's what I had to do. I had to get a release. And Christine says she doesn't care. I didn't care either. I didn't really.
The release that you got was from the church?
From the prophet of the church.
So had you tried to legally get married, you could have, though, without getting that release, correct?
Right. Because there's no anywhere on legal paper. But if I wanted any sort of the estate that we had already started to create, or any of the homes, we had a couple homes, we had a couple of stuff. My ex-husband actually did very well financially. And so we had a lot of resources.
Yeah.
And, but the biggest thing is I just wanted to make sure that I had legal custody of the children. So that was the biggest reason that I did it, because I didn't want him to have any custody.
Yeah. And your daughter at the time was the middle child, correct?
Right.
So she would have been 5.
Right.
So, and that's what kind of propelled you to get out, right? Was in the podcast, you said you noticed there were men already starting to like look at her.
Right. She is very beautiful. And she, at 2 years old, they started looking at her. And I was so disgusted by it that I decided to leave. But then my last baby was medical baby. He was sick. And I honestly thought God was punishing me because he was sick. So I ran back to the polygamous church for almost 2 solid years before I decided to leave again. And then when I left again, I never went back.
So now what is your relationship like? I know this wasn't, but this is where the conversation went. Okay. No. So if I ask a question that you feel like is too invasive or it's one you don't, please tell me. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. What did that do to your relationship with your parents?
The very first time I left, my parents were obviously really sad so my grandmother had 11 children. Last count, there's about 350 grandchildren.
Wow.
And I was the very first one born into polygamy.
Holy
and I was the very first one to get married into polygamy and then leave. No one had ever left before. So nobody really knew how to handle it. Nobody knew what to do. Right. And so there was a lot. It was really hard the first time. And then the second time I decided to leave was even harder on my dad. But he finally got to a conclusion where he just wanted people to believe in Christ. And he had to come to that conclusion or he would have lost his mind, because I have I think it was 34 biological brothers and sisters, but then I have several that have just married in. And
that's crazy too. I thought I had a big family, but man, that's insane.
Yeah. So only a few of them have stayed and lived that way. So
are your parents still in polygamy or not?
Well, my dad's the leader. So
that's right. I did know that.
Yeah.
So do you say his name or do you not say his name?
Oh, I can say it's Dave Watson. So he's the leader of the polygamous church. Yeah.
Wow.
So he actually was he was converted when he was 16 or 17 by Christine's grandpa, Rulon Allred. And if you ever watch the show Daughters of a Cult, they talk about where he was executed in that show.
Yes.
So he's the one who actually converted my dad and my mom. And he was the doctor who delivered me when I was born.
Wow.
So our ties go in pretty deep with the AUB. So when the AUB was first established, he was the first prophet to be in the AUB.
So now, given all of that, does it scare you to talk out like this and to kind of come forward with your story?
No, I actually never thought about really coming forward with my story, but my younger sister did an interview with a podcaster whose name we shall not even bother to give airtime to.
Correct.
And she was brutal and so misleading. And so I kind of just sat back and thought, why aren't I saying something?
Yeah.
And it's been a process for sure, because my mom will beg me, release something. When's your next podcast coming out? And then I'll do it. And then she'll get her feelings all hurt. And then it'll take some time to heal through some of it. And so, yeah, my parents, it's definitely, my dad, I haven't talked to my dad about the podcast. He actually went and removed himself from all of my social media so that he doesn't have any, so nobody can try to connect him to anything.
Yeah.
And I still see him and we still talk, but it's not, he's obviously hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. I get that. You have followed my page. My heritage is conservative Mennonite. My father-in-law, so my big guy's dad, was a Mennonite minister. Mm-hmm. He's obviously retired now and significantly aged. But when he was younger, I remember him I was new coming into the family, and they had one daughter. And I remember him telling her she got her ears pierced when she went to college. And she came home and he had an absolute, those have to come out. Those have to come out. And she was like, I'm an adult. I can do what I want. And his response was, this will reflect poorly on me. Mm-hmm. I am the head of the Mennonite church here where we live, and I will take a hit as this. You have to take them out.
Correct.
And I think when you are in that, it sounds like that's probably kind of what your dad did with social media.
Right.
I gotta step away because what my daughter's doing can make me take a hit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and he's been he's been the media source for all media. So when they want to report anything on the AUB, they would go to him. So he's the representative for the AUB until he recently became the prophet. And so before that, he was the one who, if any of the local news outlets, so when the Browns started Sister Wives, he was the one who counseled them on
not doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he was the one who also was, that all the news outlets would call him and talk to him about it and be like, what do you think about this? A family in here. And truthfully, when they first came out, my dad was at my house and we were talking about it. And I was saying, honestly, if anyone can do a good representation, it's this family. They're an amazing family.
Yeah.
And so it's been interesting to watch the way the show's navigated their lives. It's really tragic because
it is. I remember when I first watched the very first episode of the Browns, they bring Robin in very quickly, and I didn't realize that. I recently, in the past year, went back and rewatched everything.
Right.
And I was a little shocked because I think my first impression when I watched it the first time was, here is this family that is so functional and they've chosen this lifestyle, but they're so normal and they're adapted and this is great and the kids are happy because you're seeing this surface level.
Right.
And it's not you talk in the podcast about how there's always a first wife, there's always a working wife, there's a spiritual wife, there's the trophy wife or the jealous wife. And you don't see that when you watch that first episode of the Browns. You just see all these adults and all these children and everybody looks happy. And Robin comes in on that very first episode. And I remember thinking, what are they doing? Why are they messing up something that is working? And now, 18 seasons later, you realize it wasn't working. It looked on the surface like it was working, but indeed it was not working.
And truthfully, I think out of all the families, their family is one that before Robin came into it, they were very high functioning. They were I loved their dynamic of the way that they raised the children together. But what was hard for me, I mentioned, I did that TikTok a couple days ago about didn't really cover a lot on Sister Wives. And I've had a lot of other fellow AUBs that are TikTokers. Please comment on this. If anybody could comment on this, it would be you.
Can.
Yeah. So I really had to take some soul searching to decide if I really wanted to do that or not. But I would watch the episodes and I would hear the snide remarks. No one else, if you were a regular viewer, you wouldn't understand.
Because you knew what to listen for.
Right. And that's why I stopped watching it for so long, is because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is driving me crazy. Here they are presenting it to be this way. And yet you knew that comment was going to be a fight later, or you knew that comment was a sliver.
When you watch the show, is it actually indicative of what their real life is like?
I think that it borders down to Yes, but it's so over dramatized. You know, I've been told so many times that they've had to reshoot scenes because that wasn't a big enough scene, and so they've had to reshoot scenes. Now, I've talked to Mary a couple of times. Mary and I still stay in contact, but
Okay.
I've talked to her a couple of times about the show. I ran into her in a public place, and so we talked, I don't know, an hour and a half, and so many people kept coming up to her. It was a little bit harder, but she would tell me a little bit.
Yeah, she's very well lit. I keep asking her for an interview, and she will not do it. I think she just doesn't trust me.
I love her.
And I think that she's afraid I will do what has been done to her so many times before.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not going to do that to you. But that was one of my questions actually for you is, who are you? Sorry, my hair's doing weird things. I was playing this morning. Who are you closest to of them? And do you know all of them?
So growing up, I was closest to Christine because her
grandfather, your
yeah.
father.
So when my dad first started joining the AUB, her grandma was, you know, a lot of times when people leave the outside world and come into a cult world, then they get isolated from their family. And so my grandparents hadn't quite joined. And so typically there's a family that will take that person in and kind of adopt them and make them one of their own.
Okay.
Well, Christine's dad, his mom was that person. So my dad was kind of adopted into, she had 3 boys. My dad was kind of adopted in as the 4th boy. So I always grew up calling her grandma. I just grew up with Christine. My mom was super good friends with her mom. And then my sister-in-law married her older brother. So we were just very, very intertwined all through high school.
I would imagine age-wise, you're very similar too.
I think she's 2 years older than me.
Okay. Yeah.
And
So you're close in age. Yeah.
And through high school, we shared lockers next to each other. So we were very, very, but over the last 20 years, no, I haven't really seen her or had much to do with her. I mean, I would, if I saw her in public, I would say hi to her. You know, if I saw her somewhere, I'd absolutely say hi to her. I have no problem with that. But Mary and I have kind of stayed a little bit more. When Cody joined, he was actually raised in the mainstream LDS church. And so he actually went on a mission. So the very first time he came to an AUB function, I was there and we became friends. And my sister was determined she was going to marry him. And so, and then Cody and Mary were kind of, they kind of came out as a couple at a party at my house. And then they were in my wedding. So I've just kind of had a lot of interaction with them throughout my lifetime. And so Mary and I would say, I'm not going to say by any means that we're close because we're certainly not close, but I have a lot of respect for her. I used to teach at the school for the AUB, and her mom and I were really good friends. So yeah, I really adored her mom.
I'll tell you what, I often will start my videos about Mary like, oh, there's just something about Mary. From the time I started watching the show, I felt so bad for Mary. Because from the beginning, you see her infertility journey. And at the time I was a working L&D nurse, and it was like, oh, you know, your heart just kind of bleeds for this woman. And then obviously she's the first wife, but she made it very clear that she really wanted to do polygamy. And I don't quite know why on the show, it makes it look like she really worked to bring Robin in. And I never understood really the relationship between her and Robin. Like this, it's like they just clicked. And then Mary became like this very kind of dark entity that it was like she was the villain too, because you just wanted to be like, would you wake up? Would you wake up? You know? Right. And now I feel like I'm really rooting for Mary, and I really want her to do well. And she has this opportunity. She's finally like shut that door and is moving on. And it's like, you just want to get behind her and root for her. Yeah. And at the same time, you're like, please let the MLM stuff go and just go, just go. Right. I don't know. Anyway, that was one of my questions was, what are your thoughts on Worthy Up?
A lot of people take their lived life experiences and try to help other people with them. And I feel like that's what she's trying to do. Yeah. She's taking her lived experiences, some of the trauma that she's healed through, and she's trying to help other people better their lives. I think that she genuinely really wants to serve other people. And so she's trying to do the best that she can with it. I haven't joined the community or anything like that, but I wholeheartedly support her in.
Yeah. I get the impression that her heart is very much in a good
Right.
place. And she's trying to navigate it and maybe fumbling with some things along the way, but her motives seem to be really good.
Right.
Yeah, that's
what I think too, honestly. And there's always that one painted bad guy. It's funny because I did that TikTok last night about other people, the different personalities and wives. Everyone thought I was describing the sister wives. I genuinely wasn't. I was genuinely describing my dad's wives. And I just went through each wife. And so I just find it funny, but there tends to be a type. And so that's why it's easy to say, oh, there's this type of wife, there's this type of wife, because there tends to be a type. And I think Mary, I don't know that all of it was entirely her fault, because when you're the first wife and you cross that man, he comes after you with a vengeance. And I feel like these men pit these women against each other.
Yes.
And so then there tends to be.
That's something we have all learned watching the seasons. There was a lot of times that I know I would find myself upset with a certain one of them over something. And you're right. You go back and watch it, and a lot of it is Cody. He tells them that he doesn't talk to the other wives about. He does. Yeah, he absolutely does.
They all do.
Yeah, and it's like he's the problem.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, you said you were friends with him in high school. Are you on the hate Cody train with the rest of us?
Well, I always liked Cody growing up. He was a showboat all the time, obviously. I feel like that's just how he's always been.
His personality is that, yeah.
Right. And my sister wanted to marry him, and I was like, oh God, please no. And so I've never disliked Cody, but the show has really made me lose so much respect for him, because it's just the way, you just can't treat your family that way. And especially on national television, you can't treat your family that way.
Especially as children. I guess I kind of feel like treat the wives, whatever. Those are adult relationships. But when the kids start coming into it, I'm like, whoa, right. And on my page, I don't talk about the underage children a lot. The kids that are older and are on the show and actively like doing stuff on social media, I'll talk about because, but, the little kids, I'm kind of like, like Robin's little ones. I'm like, all right, just let them alone. Like they're little kids. They didn't ask to be there.
Right.
They didn't ask for any of this, and they're going to have enough issues growing up knowing they were on a camera all the time.
Right.
Which, speaking of the kids, do you know where Paedon is?
I don't know a lot about some of Christine's kids. I do. But not all of them. I don't know where Paedon is, to be honest.
It feels like he was so active here on social media for a long time, and then put some stuff out there that was a bit controversial, and he has clashed with some of his siblings. And a lot of Sister Wives creators will really take sides with some of the kids, like the adult kids.
Oh, gotcha.
And I kind of take the. Okay, so I'm one of three. I only have three siblings, right? And we have all had our moments where we fought over different things with different ones. I'm like, when there's that many kids, there's just bound to be a couple that just plain dislike each other.
Right.
Because their personalities just clash. Like, I don't put a lot of stock into this kid hates that kid, I'm like, whatever, they're siblings. They're going to do that.
Right.
But it feels like Paedon just kind of went away all of a sudden.
Right.
And I just noticed the other day there's a Paedon page up, and I think it's fake.
It is. I would 100% agree with you that it's a scam.
I actually put on it in all capital letters, fake page, as a comment, hoping people would see it. They probably deleted it, but it looked like it was all pulled over videos from like his page.
Right.
I'm trying to scroll here. The questions are coming fast and furious. So let me see. Somebody said that Paedon was close to Garrison, and maybe he's just struggling. That could be.
Right. Well, is he still in the military or not? He could be doing something like that. That could be too.
Yeah. Yes, that is a fake Paedon page.
Yeah. I actually followed it and then realized that it was a fake page and unfollowed it because
Yeah.
I don't want to support that.
Why won't people let Robin in the house? This is a hot question on TikTok. It's a silly question, I know, but man, do people have strong feelings about it.
So I don't know for sure, to be honest, because I had never heard of Robin until the show came out.
Okay.
My husband grew up with her, and her brother was my husband's very best friend growing up, and they're still friends to this day.
How in the world do you find people to marry in this mess? Everybody is connected to everybody
Everyone's
else.
related to somebody
Yes.
somehow. I mean, but there's about 10,000 members. So, but a lot of them are, it's funny because my kids never wanted to start dating because they're like, what if I'm related to this person? But both of my parents converted in, and then my ex-husband, both of his parents converted in. So our children have no biological relation. Yeah. And then my current husband, both of his parents converted in. So he has no biological. So I tell my kids will come home. They started a local school around here and for high school. So I had put a bunch of my kids in that school, and all of a sudden they come back and all the polygamists had put their kids in this school. I had no idea. I'd heard it from a different church about this school. So my kids are coming home and they're like, is this my cousin? Is this my cousin? I'm like, no, you have zero relation to any of these kids.
Oh dear.
But then they would come to my house and I'd be like, oh, I can tell who your parents are just by the look on their their general, because there is so much intermarrying.
Yeah.
And you can see it. But as for filming in the house, I don't know, because I just really don't know Robin at all. I have a few guesses, but they're just my own guesses.
Well, spill them, honey.
I think, truthfully, she gets judged so harshly for everything else that she does. She doesn't, and they did let a couple filmings in her house, and she might be a hoarder to some degree, and she doesn't want to be judged more for that.
She got a lot of backlash.
Right. So she'd rather just be judged for being in a beanie around a campfire than she would be for her house and how.
Well, and in all fairness to Robin, I said this not long ago. I said, I can even feel sorry for Robin. And people are like, what?
Yeah.
I think she went into this kind of what we said at the beginning of this conversation. She thought this was a very functioning, plural family, and she was going to plug into it and plug her children into it, and it was going to be great.
Right.
She plugged into it, and she enjoyed being the favorite wife and the spoiled wife. And then she had Mary, which was great. But then even Mary was like, okay, there's limits here. And then when it all started to fall apart, now she's monogamous, which is not what she wanted. Do you think she'll stick around?
I mean, is it really not what she wanted? I mean, I don't know. I don't know because I don't know her. Yeah. And so I really don't know. But yeah, she plugged herself into a family that was very high functioning. I mean, plural marriage is dysfunctional by nature. Yeah. And so there's only a certain amount of people that can actually function in plural marriage. It's not something, every single family is dysfunctional in that. And so there's no way around that. But this was one of the better families for sure. I had a lot of respect for the way that those girls really truly loved each other and looked after each other's children, because that doesn't always happen. Right. When one of the women are mad at the other women, they'll take it out on the children, and that happened to me a lot growing up. They would,
you mean in a typical plural family?
Right. So I had a lot of respect for the Browns because they didn't do that. They genuinely loved each other's children as if they were their own. And you could see that going to church. You could see that with them as they bring all the kids in and they'd all sit there. You could tell that they genuinely loved each other's children. And I don't think
in the comment section is saying, but Mary did take it out on the children. And I have questions about that. I mean, Mary has never come out and said much about that. I know she's been accused of some things by the children. Right. She's never really addressed it, and I actually kind of respect her for that. I think that it would take a lot for me to not come out pretty strong on that, Right. I don't know. I'm going to let that topic alone because I think that's a bit of a dive.
So there's a couple of TikTokers that I know on here, and they're really good friends with the one particular wife that was so abusive to us growing up. And you would never know that she was abusive to us growing up but she was physically abusive. She was emotionally abusive. She was horrible. I swore I would never speak to her again as an adult. So I understand both sides of that as from the child, because we don't always know what's happening in the adult life. We just know that we just walked into a hornet's nest and we don't know what we did to cause that.
Yeah. And kids do try to, even when it's not about them, make it about them.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of normal.
Right. And I'm not trying to defend Mary or trying to invalidate any of the children's experiences. I went through it too. I think it's just not, it's edited for TV. So
Yeah. Do you know Janelle?
I never knew Janelle until she showed up at church married to Cody. I didn't know her. I mean, I knew her ex-husband pretty well. I'd grown up with him. But I didn't know Janelle at all until she showed up married to Cody. And so, and she married Cody, I want to say I got married right after.
She was married to Mary's brother, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so my parents actually went to Wyoming quite a bit to hang out with Cody's parents. And so, because as they were new converts. And so my dad would go up there quite a bit to hang out with them. But I went up there once right after I got married to the ranch, and that was it. I never went back because I was brand new married. I mean, I got pregnant so quickly right after I got married. I literally had a honeymoon baby. I had a baby 9 months later.
You were a baby yourself. I mean,
I was. Yeah, 8 days into 17.
You weren't even old enough to really understand. I mean,
yeah. And so after we got married, my whole family, my dad took all of his wives, all of his children. We all went to the ranch and spent, I think, about a week up there on the ranch because the Brown family had just converted. And so we were all going up there to, to socialize and create and establish friendship with them, and community with them. Yeah.
Somebody wants to know if Christine is really as nice and fun to be around as she seems on the show.
Oh my gosh, she is. I love her. She is so funny.
She looks like she'd be the life of the party.
She really was.
Yeah.
And she talks a couple times on the show about the first time she was dating Cody. And it was hilarious. It was so funny to watch. I was there and I watched it the way she was so determined that he was going to be the one.
I was going to say, she stalked him and she openly says that.
Yeah. It was funny. I think she is hilarious. She is the cutest thing and she's very genuine. I think what you see with her is what you get. And so I've always loved her. I mean, sharing a locker next to her in high school was a little tricky because I have a sister who's 4 hours older than me.
Wow.
We're not twins. We were born from separate moms. And she's very similar personality to Christine. I'm very sober. I'm very analytical. I'm very left-brained. And those two yahoos would get in the hallway at high school and it was like, oh my God, they're in theater and they're doing all these things. And I'm just like, you guys are so embarrassing. So they loved it. They were very cute together.
I can see why you and Mary get along because your personalities remind me more of each other. You're more even keel.
Right.
I totally could see it because I think she's kind of, not that I know her well, but just from seeing her on here and hearing her speak, she seems more like she probably analytical, thinks through a situation.
Right.
As opposed to emotionally responding to a situation.
Right.
Where, some of us are a little more like Christine.
My mom's really appreciated it, though. She's really watched these last couple of seasons as she's been transitioning, leaving the family.
Oh, really?
And so she's really appreciated Christine's come from and the things that my mom's just like Christine's biggest cheerleader, I think.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
Are any of your kiddos religious still?
Oh gosh, no. None of my children are. No, I don't. I talk about it on one of my TikToks. My son was 11 years old. So my son's the oldest grandchild. Obviously, I got married so young. He's the oldest. And I guess I had just never really talked to them about polygamy. I hadn't taken him around it at all. And so he was stunned. He's like, wait, grandpa's a polygamist? And I'm like,
oh,
what? Yeah, I have 40 brothers and sisters. How do you not know this? I guess I just hadn't really bothered to explain it to him. So no.
He had no idea.
Yeah. He was like, I guess I just didn't think about it. And so, and my mom tends to be the one. My mom was the Christine. She was very much the mother of the family. Everyone came around her. They still do. Even though she's left, they still circle around her. They still have a lot to do with her. And so it was normal for all of the kids to be at my mom's house.
Okay.
And
So yeah, she really was the Christine.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because my kids definitely, they didn't know any different, but my mom's we're dark. The other wife is blonde with blue eyes. All of her kids are blonde. And so I'm like, you didn't see that?
So your son actually thought all of those children came from your mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm like, there's like 40 of us. I don't think she birthed all those kids. So
That's so cute though.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to what you said in your TikTok about there being the first wife, the married wife, that like that. I could see how that really does hold true in those kind of relationships. It's like they're all going to play a role.
Right.
And it kind of makes sense then that it's going to follow kind of a normal pattern.
Right. Right. And my mom was very supportive of the whole family. So she owned a business locally. And so she was very much the financial support for a lot of stuff too. My dad had a couple wives who were career ladies. And so my mom was definitely that. And I'm the oldest of my mom's children. She had 11 children. And she started this business when I was 14, and it's still up and running today. In fact, they have three separate locations. And so she did that to be able to support the FLDS communities and the AUB communities. So my mom is extremely well known locally. And she was invited into the the FLDS really shut down and didn't want their communities, no one in there. When they moved from Salt Lake down to Colorado City, and you had to go through this whole vetting process to even be able to step into Colorado City. And so my mom was one of the very few that was able to do that, because she would go down there and she would teach all of her knowledge that she knows about. So she got cancer, and they wanted to do all this stuff and told her she'd never have any more children. Well, she healed it naturally, all that, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah. And it had 6 more children after that. So she started a health food store because she couldn't afford all of the medical everything. My mom never went on state assistance. I know that's a huge controversial thing for people. She never did.
Yes.
She just wanted to take care of herself. And so her way of being able to afford the care that she needed was to start her own store. So that's what she did. Yeah.
Yeah. She's a go-getter.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's slowing down now, though. She's 70 now, and she's tired. So.
Well, 11 kids, just the sound of that makes me tired.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is.
That's a lot. So how many wives did your dad end up having?
So he had 3 most of my life. And then when I turned 14, he married a 4th one. And then when I was 19, he married a 5th one. And then he didn't marry anyone else for quite a while until he got that ticket wife. And I'm sure he's got a few more ticket wives that I just don't know about because I haven't been around in there for so long. So
is he still having children with these women?
Oh, no. He's in his 70s. So no, he's not.
Well, yeah, but.
Well, I mean, I guess that does happen.
If they're in their 30s,
Right.
Somebody wants to know, what is a ticket wife?
What?
So, they want to know what the definition of a ticket wife is.
So the ticket wife is somebody who doesn't really care if they're in the family or not. They just need a ticket into heaven, and they have to marry a worthy man, because women can't get themselves into heaven, is according to the polygamous belief. Women cannot get themselves into heaven. They have to have a worthy man to get them into heaven. So they'll go and they'll ask somebody who they deem as worthy to be sealed to them so that they can get into heaven. And that's in a nutshell. I mean, that's the short version. That's the short version of it. But so they'll marry. So he married this one woman, and they literally never spoke after they were married. And then and she passed, and he didn't go to the funeral or anything. So,
and it was his wife.
Yeah. But I don't even think they ever, they just got sealed to each other. That was it.
They never consummated anything.
When she died, he didn't even go to the funeral. I don't think any of the other wives went to the funeral either. So
Eileen says that sounds like a scam to get into heaven. They don't think God can figure that out.
Right. Thank you. I think it is I think it's such a backwards way of thinking, but
it is. It's some of the stuff like that I hear, it makes you go, why?
Right.
I don't know. Do the Browns still practice any kind of religion at this point? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't think they're still part of, in fact, I'm 99% sure they're not part of the AUB at all anymore.
I think they've said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've left. And my dad has told me several times when they left a long time ago, probably 6 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And they just kind of stopped. They were very, very counseled into not doing the show, not going public. And then they went against that anyway. So that was highly frowned upon.
Were they, which I've often wondered this, so when they left and they fled to Vegas all quick, they threw a lot of that like the police were stalking them and stuff. Was any of that tied to they actually wanted to get away from some of the pressure to not do the show from the AUB?
So I never want to discount anyone's experience. I'm sure it was something that was scary for them. And but was it over dramatized for TV?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And truthfully, yeah, because a lot of people, when they start to go on a path that differs from what they're being counseled by the leadership, they do want to get away. They want to, in that way, they can do their own thing. So that's where you get a lot of they're called independent polygamous people. They are independent of any sort of leadership.
Right.
And so, but they still practice, they still have, all of the different belief systems. They just don't believe in a leadership organization. And I feel like that's kind of what the Browns did when they went to Vegas. They just became more independent.
Yeah. So when you talk about your dad being the prophet, is there one prophet for all the churches?
Yeah. Yep. One prophet. So, and he just recently became the prophet a couple of years ago. It's set up very similar to the LDS church, where they have one leader and then 12 apostles and then like a 70s. So there's different tiers of leadership. So my dad became one of the leaders when I was 19 years old. And that's when I had a big crisis of faith. And so I already got to deal with that. Where my younger siblings, they just grew up always knowing my dad as being a leader. They didn't know any different. So once he became the prophet or the leader of the AUB, they all started going, wait a second. And that's where they started becoming more public and started speaking out more, because for them, this was like, what is happening? How is this man the leader?
Prophet now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had already gone through that at 19. And so,
so somebody wants to know, what instituted your mom starting to get out?
So I know I have to be careful about this one. So we all lived in separate houses growing up. And so it's easy. It's out of sight, out of mind when you can't see where your husband is all the time. Sure. And you can't see that he's running across the street or that he's upstairs in someone else's bedroom. And when he leaves, it's out of sight, out of mind. Sure. So my parents decided they all wanted to do a cul-de-sac type thing like the Browns did. So this is my personal opinion. My parents might tell you something totally different.
Sure, that's fair.
They did the cul-de-sac thing, and the jealous wife couldn't handle the fact that his car was parked in front of her house, but he was supposed to be, at a sister wife's house, but he was supposed to be at her house.
Okay.
And so there was just a lot of, it's almost like they went back to the very beginning of trying to live polygamy. And it's almost like they forgot how to do that. And so I feel like that's a lot of what happened with the Browns. You put them in a cul-de-sac circle like that. And when one wife, and the problem is when you throw into a mix a jealous wife, that's where the problem, because she becomes the thing that festers.
The squeaky wheel.
Right.
The squeaky wheel gets the oil, and then everybody else is mad that the squeaky wheel got the oil.
Right. And my mom was the least squeakiest wheel out of all of them. She just worked and donated and whatever. And so it was really hard for her because my dad would be with this other, he was supposed to be with her, but he still catered, because the jealous wife always creates an emergency. Yep. There's always an emergency. Yep. And so every time it was my dad's time with my mom, this wife always had an emergency, and he's just right across the parking lot. Why can't he just run over to her house and help her? Yeah. And so
somebody just said Christine was squeaky and got no oil.
Yeah, right. And that's true, because there's those wives that are so loyal that they would never leave. And he knows that. And so then when they do start going, start standing up saying, hey, wait a second,
Yeah.
which is what I feel like Christine did. She's finally started, and my mom, very similar. That's why my mom relates so much to Christine. It's
Yeah.
because she finally started standing up saying, wait a minute, this isn't, and I feel like my mom had 11 children and ran a business. And so she didn't have time to stop and think, where's my dad all the time?
Yeah.
But
Well,
now,
and when Christine had Truly, a lot of people watching the show had a huge issue with the fact that he was off with Robin and kissing on Robin and dating her.
and they should have.
And Christine's in the hospital in labor. And the irony of that is, at the time, Christine didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Right.
She was like, go home, get your stuff, say hello to everybody. Like, seemed fine with it.
Right.
I'd love to know if she was actually fine with it, or if that was just, again, because she was trying to kind of make peace and she was busy having a baby, and so was like, whatever,
Right. Well, I feel like I can't speak for Christine because I don't know what she was going through at the time, but I've seen this scenario over and over, and there's always that wife who is genuinely selfless. They want, they want the husband to be at they want all the wives to have the equal time. And so she knows he's about to come and spend a bulk amount of time with her because she's having a baby. So of course she's going to say, hey, go go make sure that everything's okay and then come back to me.
Right. Well, and I often have wondered that. I don't know that Christine would have left if Cody, honestly, just hadn't been such a jerk.
And my mom would never have left. My mom's been with my dad for 50 years.
Yeah.
And my mom is the same thing. She would, my mom is, he would come to my mom's house and he would get, she's a massage therapist and she was a healer. So he'd come to my mom's house and she would do whatever for him so that he could go home and have a nice night with another wife. I was like, Mom, how are you doing these? And I'm like, you are got to be the nicest sister wife or the dumbest sister wife. I can't decide. So
yeah, I could never. I could never. And
Right.
I think that's where it has been. I will say this about Mary. It has been so good for my soul to hear Mary finally calling Cody out on some of
Right.
that crap that he has done. Because I think, honestly, a lot of people have said they gave up on Mary. They just got almost disgusted with her because she just let herself be a doormat to him over and over and over these last few seasons, because he kind of had this mentality of like, well, Mary will never leave. Like, Mary will never leave. Mary will never leave. But he would say things even to the camera that he wouldn't say to her face. And it's been very refreshing to have her be, for me, the moment that she gained a little respect was the picnic table scene on the mountain. And she said later in an interview, I did that scene because I wanted to force him to say it on camera to my face, to the world. And I was like, go girl, like, kudos. And I was like, that was very well played, and it was good to see her finally stand up for herself.
Right.
Kind of be like, no, if you want to be with Robin, go be with Robin. None of us are stopping you.
Right.
But don't try to make us the bad guy that you want to go be with Robin.
Right.
When you've done some really crappy things through all of this.
Well, and I think that's where Cody got himself really into trouble, because this is very typical with polygamous men. They'll run to one wife and they'll say something, and then they'll run to another wife and they'll say something, and then they'll go to somebody else and they'll be like, well, so-and-so said this, and they pit these wives and the children against each other. And most families aren't functional enough to all get together and have the conversation where they're all speaking about it together. And so he can say one thing and then get to another wife and she can be like, wait, I heard this. And that's not how that happened. And then he can correct the conversation because he's not being called out publicly or even in a group setting. Yeah. So I think that's really what happened. So I really was like, good job, Mary. I was really proud of her for doing that too.
Well, and now somebody just said, when he has told the world that when he married Mary, he married the wrong person. But he wouldn't say that to her. And in the sneak peek that we've seen, he actually says it to her, and her reaction, I want to be like, girl, you got to pass. Go ahead, hit him. And I'm not for violence, but it's like such a crappy thing to say.
I know.
And you know it's not true. I mean, I love
I
that
was there when they were dating. I was at their wedding. It was,
right.
he was head over heels in love with her.
Yes. And it's like, you can see it in the very first episode of Sister Wives. And when he tries to come out with Christine and say that too, like, I never really loved you. It's like, dude, come on.
Right.
You clearly were at least attracted to her because you have 6 kids with her. So
Right.
you want to come up with something different because you sound stupid now. You know?
So every time we watch, so I actually didn't watch a lot of the seasons because I would just get so like, what the?
Frustrated.
Yeah, I would get so enraged. And so they do these couch scenes. I'm like, oh my God, do they not know that people are going to watch this?
Right.
And so my dad, one of the wives would go to my dad a lot because she struggled with the show a lot. And she would say to him, and he would say to her, you know that they're looking for sound bites. You know that they're looking for things to just clip. And when they put it all together, that's not how you have to get through this. You have to move past this. You're only a soundbite to TLC. And so,
but wait a minute. Even after they were counseled by your dad to not do the show, and then they did the show, and then they had problems, they were going back. One of the wives was going back to your dad for counsel
pretty regularly, all the way up until probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. So.
Huh.
And he said the same thing. He's like, I've given you counsel. You haven't followed my counsel. I don't know what you want me to do at this point. So
I bet I could guess which wife it was, but I won't put you in that.
You probably could guess too. And you probably would be right.
Oh, I love it. That's so much fun.
Yeah.
Somebody said, how does the money work? Who pays what and how much do they put in the family account? I'm assuming that's different with every family.
It is. Yeah. There's a lot of families who have like a communal account that they all put everything in. There's a lot of families that don't, where the dad just, gives an allowance to each one of the wives, depending on, and then a lot of them, it depends on, that is one thing that really frustrated me about watching Sister Wives is it really felt very unfair because Christine did have 6 kids and I'm sorry that Mary couldn't, but everything can't be across the board equal and fair and expect the family to financially survive. Yes. And so my dad would give each wife an allowance. It was supposed to be according to how many children she had to support those children. He would financially do the houses and do all the utilities, anything that was financially for the home, he would cover all of that. Yeah. And then the wives would have to work to cover, the little extras. And then he would give them an allowance per child to help with that.
Like child support, basically.
Right. Yeah. Right. And there's always the one wife who got more than everyone else, and she always insisted on having more. And then there's always the wife who never got much of anything because she didn't complain about it. And so, there's always that level. And I think it just depends on the family and how they decide to run things.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, like Mary and her dry sink, that divided fans for the longest time. When they built in Vegas, Mary was like, no, I'm not going to have the smaller house than everybody else just because I couldn't have 6 kids and I only have 1 kid. And a lot of people were like, that is such a slam that he even wants to do that. And I was kind of like you. I was like, well, yeah, but you don't need, like, if you look at it as one big family,
right,
then it only makes sense that she would have a smaller house because it's just her, right.
Well, and those are the things that coming from the background that we could watch and see and be like, that right there is going to tear this family apart.
Yeah.
That right there is because then you've got people like,
you start to see the cracks.
Yeah. And so, and you can see right the path that they're headed down. You can see right when you're like, that's not going to last much longer. There's just no way. He can't support that lifestyle for every single wife when one wife's got 6 or 7 kids and the other wife has 1 or 2.
Yeah.
It's just unsustainable. Just logistically, it's unsustainable. Financially, it's unsustainable. So.
Right. And that's almost looking at it more like he has. And I have wondered if this is too where they got in trouble. He made such a point of saying that each marriage is an individual relationship. But financially, that would mean that you would have to have 4 full-time incomes for each family.
Right.
Because if you're going to run it as one big family, then you're going to have to find a better way to split the money. I mean, the math don't math otherwise. I can see that.
Right.
Somebody wants to know, do you think that Cody will ever humble himself and feel sorry for his behavior?
No. And
No,
so
me
I've been
either.
divorced for 25 years now. And my ex-husband literally 2 weeks ago said to my son, who's now 33, says to my son, your mom should have been forced to stay married to me. I got divorced because of, I wouldn't let him have his second wife. So he did prostitutes instead. So I ended up getting divorced for that reason. Right. And so he feels like 25 years later that I should have been forced to stay married to him, because now now he's found God again, and he's found Jesus in his life, and now he's the very best version of himself, and I don't get to enjoy that version of him because I left him too soon.
Wow, pure narcissism at its core, right there, man.
So do I think Cody will? Absolutely not. No, he 100% believes, and in my experience, I have not seen very many men humble themselves and actually come in and say,
in all fairness to them, it's because they're taught from the time they are little, this patriarchal mentality of like, my way or the highway, the women, I own the women. Like, that's what they're taught. And that can be similar when I go back to my Amish roots. Men very much are, I am the head of this house, mentality. And you're not, that ain't going away once that has been kind of taught to them.
Right. Well, and here's my dad. He's the leader, and he's, going through this with my mom currently, and he feels done wrong. It's her fault. Everything's her fault.
Yeah.
And he feels completely done wrong. He feels like she, and he lets her know, I don't care if you leave me. I still basically own you. And so there is a lot of that happens. A lot of the other mentality that I see a lot, I personally have experienced, is once a child gets old enough, they're almost discarded. And it's like, okay, well, and then they go on their healing. They start to heal. So then they're coming back to the parents going, hey, wait, what about this? What about this? And then the parents, instead of wanting to actually heal that or work through that with them, they're just like, oh, that one was a lost cause. Let's move to the next set of kids.
Yeah. And
I have literally had my dad say that to me. Well, I guess we didn't know what we were doing with you older children. So now we have the next set of children.
Wow.
And so it's very common because, you got dozens of children. If you mess up on the first 10, well, you had that 11th child that you're going to make perfect. And so when I see that type of behavior, the way he treats his kids, it's not surprising to me at all, because I've personally experienced that, and that is very common in the polygamous church.
So is it more common with the dads to the boys?
I would say, well, I mean, I'm not a boy, and my dad was very much that way with me.
Right.
And so I wouldn't say it necessarily has a gender necessarily.
Okay.
The girls just tend to be a little bit more nurturing with the father. And so a lot of times, like, he'll be very disconnected, and then all of a sudden he'll be in a fight with all of his wives, and he'll be like, but my daughter still loves me. So then he'll go back for that kind of nurturing, if that makes sense. So yeah, and this is not all polygamous men. I'm not trying to speak, because there's some really good ones that genuinely love their children.
Oh, sure.
And you can see
Sure.
So.
Well, and do you follow Punk Rock Polygamist on here?
Yeah, we're actually good friends.
Yeah, and I have a lot of respect for him.
He's the one who was talking me into talking about this.
Oh, good. Yeah, I've talked to him quite a bit. We're mutual friends too. And he is one that I think breaks that mold a lot.
Yeah.
He's very involved in with his children, all of them. And yeah, somebody said that explains so much why Cody made the comment that only his younger children need him.
Right.
And the other thing too with that is, even though he's hearing it from the general population and we're all screaming from the rooftops, if he's going back to the leadership of the AUB and the leadership is like, no, they just don't understand because they're not scripturally in the doctrine and they don't know, then that's reinforcing the bad behavior.
Oh, you don't know how many times I have been told that. And I'm like, but I do, like, I'm not going to say I'm the most scripturally versed. I'm certainly not.
Right.
I'm not the most historically versed on histories of the polygamous religion.
Sure.
I know enough that I can make a decision one way or the other. But there were so many times that I would go to my mom and I'd say, Mom, you have to put your name on something financially.
Yeah.
And she would be like, you don't understand. And I would get dismissed.
Yeah.
And now that she's going through it, now she's like, why didn't I put my name on anything financially? And I'm like, oh my God, I've been telling you this for 25 years.
Yeah.
And so now it's coming back to root. And so this is really what happens is they dismiss so much because you don't understand the higher laws of the gospel. And
Yeah.
so therefore, and so then that's how they get through the justification of being such basically a shitty parent. So,
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, Janelle made that comment when she left. How did I get here? I am the one who worked all these years, always
Right.
said I would never not have my name on something. And here I am wanting to leave and I own nothing.
Yep.
You know, and that's where everybody really rooted for Janelle because we all saw her being the hard worker and dumping all the money in and doing all the financial planning.
Right.
And then Coyote Pass came up and it was like her name was on nothing.
Right.
Which, do you know what has happened with that?
I don't know. I mean, keeping up to date on a lot of the Brown stuff, I haven't.
Yeah.
You know, I hear the rumblings and the rumors because from the Montana perspective. So
Sure.
I was born and raised here where both my ex-husband and my current husband were raised in Montana.
Yeah.
And that's where Robin was raised. So that's why I didn't know who she was. And then she had moved away by the time I got married and you know, had anything.
Oh, this was on my list and I forgot to ask it.
Apparently I didn't.
There you go. Does Cody have a job that you know of other than selling those things that you hold in your hand?
No, I don't know. I've been curious about that myself. Like,
I have
how do we
heard
justify it?
Polygamist has said before, and I've never asked him about it. He has made comments in like his lives before and stuff that he knows people who work with Cody and that Cody does. Oh, please don't use those words in the comments, people. Please don't. Sorry. Please don't use that. It'll get this live cut off. So please don't indicate anything that has anything to do with the things you hold in your hands. He has made the comment that he knows people that Cody works with and that they don't want to be linked to Cody publicly in any way. But that Cody does have things that he does on the side.
Yeah,
And it's been very vague.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've questioned what a lot of different polygamous men do for a living. And a lot of times you just don't even know. Like which is so weird to me that you wouldn't know. Like my dad, he owned a mechanic shop, or, you know, he started with Corvettes. So he had like a ton of Corvettes when he was a teenager. And so he just started this business that he then had his entire life till he retired.
I mean, the money thing has come up a lot. People are like, how do they financially afford this? Even if you're putting all the money in one pot to support that many people, you know, we've got people that are struggling to support having 3 kids. How in the world are they supporting having 20?
Well, we were so broke. We were so poor. We would go to local Catholic food lines and get food that way.
Yeah.
My mom never really got government assistance until she had a disabled child. And he was, I want to say he was like 14 before we finally forced her to go get on state assistance, because she never wanted to, well, she was afraid of the government and she thought they would come and take him away because he had Down syndrome and he was very disabled. Yeah. And so she was so afraid of that aspect of it that she just never went and got on assistance, but she couldn't financially do it anymore either. Mm-hmm. And so we were helping to pick up the slack. So that is one thing. When the kids get old enough, most of them will go out to work. I had to go out. I started working outside of the home at 14. I started working inside of the home at 12. And so that's just how it was. So my dad's been super offended whenever I talk about that. I financially supported my family. And he did. He financially supported the wife that he felt was his family. And the rest of us got what was left over.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I have to say, sorry, I have got this cough.
That's okay.
That is similar to, I feel like my Mennonite,
Yeah.
when I go back, not necessarily now, but in the years past, a lot of the Mennonite do not want any kind of governmental involvement.
Right.
We don't want them in here snooping around. We don't, nothing, you know?
Well, and truthfully, that's why I didn't legally get married. And I didn't even get birth certificates for my children until my oldest was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And so I just
We're
because
taught
and,
that fear.
right. And my ex-husband, his family is from Mexico. And so we wanted to take our children to see where his dad was from. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't take him across the border. And I was like, oh crap, do I even really want to get a birth certificate?
Yeah.
And so that was the very first, well, actually he was 7. He was 7 the first, yeah. And so then I went in there and filed birth certificates for them, for my older 3 children. They didn't
I remember when our youngest, I got married very young. I turned 19 and got married a week later. So I was 19 in 7 days. And we had a baby at 21. And then he had like hearing, not really hearing loss, but he needed tubes in his ears. So he had a speech delay. And my pediatrician wanted to send him to speech therapy. And he said, you know, it's available through the state. I'm sure you qualify, because I was 21 and we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. And I remember going home and being terrified that I was, sorry, I'm crying, and I'm not really crying. It's just from this cough. Being terrified to go to the state service center and apply for him to have this hearing test because it was through the state. And why? I don't know. And that was where I sat there going, why am I afraid to do this? Because, like, there's nothing to be afraid of, but because you're kind of always taught that that's scary and you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And this self-sustaining thing runs very, very deep in that, in the Amish and Mennonite community. And so that just felt very like, I don't know if I should do that, you know. And it obviously was fine, but we have that in common.
I feel like there's a lot, and in each individual family that can be different. One wife might take full advantage of any sort of government assistance that's available, where the other wife won't. Yeah. And that's kind of what happened in our family. We had 1 or 2 wives that would go on to a ton of different assistances, and they always had food. We never had food. Oh. And so I remember one time staying home from church, from Sunday school, and I was really sick, and I was like, what am I going to do? I was probably 7. Oh my. And I had to go through the house, and I found a couple of potatoes, and then I found a little bit of flour, and I made a potato soup that was like the most ridiculous. And you were 7. Oh yeah. I was the oldest. I had to do that real quick. My mom comes home from Sunday school and she fell apart, and she's crying, and she's like, I didn't know what I was going to feed you guys today. Thank you for making this happen. And I literally just like went through the cupboard and tried to find whatever spices we had to try to season this soup. And your dad thought he was financially, taking care of you with that. Well, yeah, he didn't see a lot of that, because the money was saved so that when he came home, we would have real meals. When he came home, we were threatened to be on our best behavior. And so he didn't really experience a lot of that. He didn't see a lot of that. And my mom was the one who would just figure it out so that he didn't have to be bothered by it, because my mom didn't want to be the squeaky wheel. Somebody else brought that up, that with Cody, maybe that's been part of the problem, what you just alluded to, that the men, like we got to see what was going on in each of these women's houses when Cody wasn't around. Right. When Cody shows up, it's wonderful. And everything is cleaned, and we're having dinner, and it's like you've walked into a movie set. Yeah. Where a typical man who has one wife and all his children is there every night and seeing the argument over the dishes and hearing what are we going to have for dinner tonight? We don't have enough food. Right. And so I can imagine how that really does go to that feeds back into their head then. Because every house they go to, it looks like everything is wonderful and provided for and great. Yep. And that's exactly how it is. And that's not the case. Yeah. Literally, we didn't have food most of the time. We really had to figure out how to feed And, you know, being the oldest, a lot of times that fell onto my responsibility to figure out how to make dinner or what to do.
How to make it happen.
Yeah. And so it was a brutal, you know, my grandmother lived right next to a Catholic church, and they would do the food lines. And that's the only reason we even knew about it. So we would go over there and get cheese and stuff like that. And that was like Christmas. And then, you know, there was a lot of them went to the bakery and got day old, whatever they were going to throw away. And we would get that food. Yeah. It was we were not financially supported.
No.
I mean, we did have a home. We did have, you know, but we didn't have any of the extras. If there's typically a wife that will get most of the extras and everyone else just kind of gets whatever's left over. And I had a mother like that who everything went to her house.
And that has to instill such like food trauma.
Yeah.
You know, in small children.
Well, it's funny. It changes the way you, like for me, I have a very strict rule in my home. You don't hide food. Yeah. If you buy something or bring it into the home, everybody gets to share with it, because that's what they would do. They would wait till we go to bed and then they would pull out the good stuff. But as a child, you were not allowed to eat any of those things. You got whatever was left over. Yeah. And my mom would try to garden every year, but here she is battling cancer. She's got a dozen freaking kids and she owns her own health food stores. And so, you know, trying to find gardening time in there is a little bit harder too. But she loved to garden, and she would try to garden as much as she could to try to feed us.
Wow. What a struggle.
Right.
So tell me now, what do you want to do with Notes to Self? So what are you hoping to where to go with this?
Right. So I started it because of my sister and her speaking out. And I thought, you know, maybe we should have a platform where we can tell the truth about things that's not so overblown. And it's funny because people tell me all the time, you should write a book, you should do this, you should do that, because of how many life experiences I've had. And I was to think, oh, who am I? I get imposter syndrome a lot where I'm like, nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And so, but I feel like if there's any level of opportunity to, you know, tell your story and help one person go through whatever they're going through, know that there's hope on the other side of that. Know that there's life on the other side of whatever they're going through. So many times in my life, I didn't know if I was going to make it to the next minute, let alone the next day. Wow. And so that's really where I want to go with the podcast, is giving that hope to people of, look, you can go through these things and here's where you can come out, you know, and, life now, if I would have known 25 years ago the way my life would be now, I would have
left sooner.
I would have absolutely have left sooner. Well, and then it's funny because then I go marry another polygamous kid, which I swore I wouldn't do. And then I just happened to meet him and we became such good friends way before we ever even got married. And so then he's so different from any other polygamous man. I used to say to him, why do you think that your family is so different?
Well, now, did he ever practice polygamy?
No. Okay. He actually was excommunicated and kicked out of the group. He's kind of would be considered not one of those lost boys, but very similar, where he was kicked out for adultery. And he was not married and she was not married, but they wanted to get rid of him somehow. Yeah. And so the best way they could do that is to say, you're out of here, because she was promised to another man.
Someone else.
Right. And so, and so he was kicked out and actually formally excommunicated.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, so when we started dating, we literally had so many conversations before we would agree to settle down together. Yeah. Like, you can never go back to this. And so, because that is what happens a lot of times. People will get married, they'll start establishing a family, they'll start having a couple of kids, and then one person goes, I feel like we should go back. And then now you've got to either dissolve this entire family, or you have to compromise and go back with them.
What surprises me so much, because I would think once you leave and you're not in that situation where you're being forced all that drama and trauma, why in the world would you want to go back? Like, it makes no sense to me.
Well, like with me, I went back because my baby was sick.
Yeah.
And it's so ingrained into your mind. And when you're raised in a cult, it's so ingrained into your mind of this is a punishment for me. God's punishing me. This is why my child's sick. This is why I'm having these financial difficulties. This is why my wife's leaving me. This is why someone died. You start to blame these physical things on God punishing you. And it is until you fully deconstruct your religious beliefs, you will constantly have these major crises of faith, and then you'll run back. And that's really where I want to, with Notes to Self, go through, like I did a whole podcast on deconstructing faith, which I'll still do a lot more about that, because we don't know what we don't know. Yeah. And we find, like for me, I found these little notes. I'm the biggest note person. Like if you see my computer, I've got a dozen, little blurps that I would put out because they resonated with me, but I don't know why. And so when I start to heal some of those parts of myself, then I'm like, oh, that's why that resonated with me. That's why that
somebody just said, this is going back a little bit, but it's interesting. We were talking about the food hunger. And somebody said, what do you think about the note on Robin's fridge asking permission to get food?
Well, I feel like, okay, so you know how we can see those little behind the scenes where like, well, that's going to cause issues. That's one of those things. It's one of those things where, and my husband grew up with both of those girls, but it causes separation. Yeah. Where I feel like the original three wives, they were so much a part of integrating and we're one, we're whole. And then you get somebody who comes in and causes separation. Yeah. And that's what the notes like that do. They cause separation where the children don't feel quite as welcome. They don't feel quite as, wait a minute, is this really my home or is this not my home? Where they can run over to Christine's and it is their home, you know? And so that level of, they're just little I call them slivers. They're little slivers that they're so tiny that you're like, gosh, that kind of hurts, but I don't know why it hurts.
And not sure what to do with it.
Right. And it starts to fester. And then you're like, oh, that's why that hurt. That caused that separation. Yeah. And so a note like that is, it's sad to me to see, but it's just one more way that Robin removes herself from the full integration of the family.
She did. And she always seemed to want, she would always say that she wanted all the children to be siblings, but she always treated her children, she wanted a little more for her children than fair. And that does not, even in a regular monogamous marriage, if he has children and you have children and you treat your children a little bit better than his, it's not going to work because the kids are going to see that, you know?
Right. Yeah. And that's a perfect way to say it is, when people get married and they have separate children, either they're, that was one of my biggest reasons I didn't want to get divorced. Yeah. I was so worried about the stepfather syndrome for my kids or the stepmother syndrome for my kids. So I tolerated this really bad behavior for years before I stepped away from it. Yeah. And, but I did that because I was more afraid of that stepfather syndrome thing. And because I lived it, I grew up that way. We were not treated the same. We would go to Christmases and they would have more than us. We always celebrated Christmas together. And one year I'll never forget my little sister, my mom had scrimped and saved enough to buy her a rocking chair with a baby in it. And they were brand new. They weren't secondhand. We only ever got secondhand. And so this was a brand new rocking chair with a brand new baby in it. And so my mom had set it up to display it. And I was like, being the oldest, I was going to police this. You were pumped. Yeah. I was just, and I was going to make sure that these other kids didn't think it belonged to them. Well, we go to Christmas and my little sister, from the other mother comes up and she's like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. She's so excited about it. And I'm like, that's not yours. And she goes, yeah, your mom would never be able to buy you guys this type of stuff. And that's just how it happens in polygamy. And when you don't have adults who can step in and say, yeah, that's not how we treat each other, then you know what I mean? And so you have some adults who are that way, especially in the Brown family.
But if it's not uniform.
Exactly. Then that's the kind of separation that you're seeing. And kids are so in tune to the emotions of what's happening. They might not know why it's happening, but they're in tune to the fluctuation of the emotions. Yeah. And so when one wife's sitting back watching her children be treated unfairly and the other wife's being a queen bee, the children sense that, they feel that, they see that separation, and then they say, what's wrong? And they don't ever blame the parents. They blame themselves. What's wrong with me? Why is she why can't I go to her house and eat, but she can come to my house and eat?
Yeah.
And so that's where you're seeing a lot of the separation.
Yeah, somebody said, kind of like when Cody bought mini bikes for Robin's kids, but he didn't for anybody else's.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Guess how many trampolines we owned growing up? 0. But the other mom, she had like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you still connected with your siblings from your other mothers?
Yeah. Yeah, we are. There's some who have taken a step back as I've been posting more and talking about things. There's some who have taken a step back. But being the oldest, majority of everything happens at my house. And my husband's the oldest, and my husband's actually the first one born into polygamy, and I'm the first one born into polygamy. His mom's the second wife, my mom's the second wife.
Oh, cool.
And so our house tends to be where everyone congregates to our homes.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and honestly, most of us kids get along with each other pretty well, and you can't really see who belongs to what mother.
Okay.
But there are always those ones who have taken that step back who don't have anything to do with the family. There's still those kids too. So
it's good to hear though that as adults you've been able to put a lot of that pain to recognize that wasn't child to child, that was adults that were setting that up, and that you can recognize that. And and there's always that, like my mom and the other mom, kind of like Janelle and Christine, our kids, their kids, we're the ones who get along the best. Like we're the ones. And then there's another wife, and she came in she had 3 kids when she came in, and we still get along very well with those kids, but they were, the one that was 2, she's like a full-on sister. But the 2 boys have kind of pulled themselves back. They don't have a lot to do with the family. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and I think that happens even in any, Mennonite families are big. My mom, I have like a ton of aunt and uncles. I have an uncle that I've met once. And when you get a family that's that large, it's like we said before, you're going to have some that just don't get along,
Right.
That's just kind of how it is. I don't take too much in stock in that.
Yeah.
Guess who just joined our live? Speaking of
hey there.
rock.
Hey,
Yeah, he's on here.
Polygamist.
I just saw him jump on, and I was like, were your ears itching? Because we were talking about you. Well, listen, I don't want to tie up your whole Saturday. I want you to know how very much I appreciated you doing this.
Oh, of course.
If you all are looking for her YouTube channel, it is called Notes to Self. She posts there quite a bit. Go follow her here, follow her there. And we are all really, really looking forward to your input this season when Sister Wives starts. I know, I can't wait. I would love to do this again. Once it starts, we can talk about it more, and I would love to get your input.
Yeah, I was actually going to call Punk Ross Polygamist and say, hey, you want to go live sometimes together after some of these?
That would be a blast.
Yeah.
I would be all in.
Yeah,
I would be all in. I'll go live with you guys.
It's hard too. I don't always know how to filter. And so I tend to just say things how they are and get myself in trouble. So I've had to really... I don't do a very good job of it, and I ramble. So rambling, I know, is part of a trauma response of not feeling heard growing up, and not feeling seen. And so it's something I'm currently working on healing. I didn't realize how severe it was until I started posting. And then I'm like, oh God, that's pretty severe. So I'm nervous about the commentary because I don't always know how to filter things that shouldn't always be said publicly.
Yeah, I verbally vomit. So the more that I get in a situation where no one else is talking, I'm like, I better speak. And I just start and I think it's just my desire to build intimacy with other people.
Right.
And so I tend to just, so.
Yeah, I know. And I've been wondering too, as some of these have been coming out and getting posted, I'm like, ooh, do I need to get a hold of maybe, and Mary and I are the ones that have been the closest, and I really don't want to step on her toes.
Sure.
And I don't, when my brother passed a couple months ago, or a year ago, she reached right out and was so sweet about it. And then her brother just recently passed, and I reached out to her, and when we see each other in public, we're very, we connect very well.
Yeah.
And so I have been a little bit concerned, and I didn't know if it was appropriate for me to reach out to her to say, hey, look, I'm going to probably be talking about this.
Yeah.
Just out of respect for the friendships.
Sure.
And then with Christine, I haven't really connected with Christine in a couple of years. We have with a couple of her kids and stuff because we're kind of
Your lives are going to cross. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's been an interesting way to navigate, not wanting to disrespect or hurt friendships, but then still talk about an experience or a story.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they've gone public and made this lifestyle so public that, and that's not unfortunate. I don't say it to be unfortunate for that, but that's what we have to reference.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm not trying to bash or bad talk on their family, but it is what we have to reference because it's something that everyone has in common and they're watching it.
Right. We're all seeing it unfold.
Right.
Well, and that's kind of how not to take it back to me, but when you were talking about some TikTokers who cover sister wives have ruined it for everybody. And then, a lot of people, like when I reached out to you and was like, hey, let's do this interview. I totally get the hesitancy because your sister was burnt.
Hard.
Because a lot of people are just like, I just want the dirt. Like,
yeah.
And I just, to me, I'm just not that person. And I don't know whether it's my upbringing or what, but it's like, I want the truth.
Right. Yeah. And this other, I don't know that you want to call it. I mean, it is a form of creation, I guess. This other creator just really took what she said, twisted it, and posted so far out of context that everything that she said was just made to burn her. And of course, it devastated a lot of people in our family too. They were very upset about it. And it got to the point where I finally had to speak out and say something on it. As public of a platform as I can, just my own personal social media. But the response, I mean, I got thousands of views on it. And so I'm like, well, maybe I can start to speak out about things, and I do get imposter syndrome a lot. Like nobody, who's going to want to listen to me? But I do have a lot of life experiences. And if I really can share an experience that gives anyone an ounce of hope that, better days are ahead, and you can get through some of these experiences and still find the hope on the other side. That's really the whole point of the podcast is to
love that.
Have that.
I love that.
Yeah. And just, Punk Rock Plymouth says, yep, she's pulling her strings. Well, and every time she's like, I've spoken to an inside source in the AUB, I'm like, who are you talking to? Because that is not true. And so it's interesting to me when she, never reveals her sources, but loves to say she has them.
Don't get me started on her.
Yeah.
She makes I can get so angry.
I can too. She's been quite, and my sister loves her and they're still friends and that good for her.
Really?
Yeah. And so they're still
even
good friends.
After that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, cause there's a lot of stuff that.
Explain that one to me.
I don't understand it myself. She's watching this live too. So I don't understand it myself, but, and maybe they don't still talk regularly, but they were talking for quite a while. And I feel like there's a couple of different, something will happen and then this creator will reach out to whatever her sources are and they'll just tell what they've heard through the gossip chain. Nobody really knows one-on-one what has happened. And that's why I try not to relate other people's experiences. I'm trying to talk about my own experiences and the things that I personally have been a part of.
And when you are in a religious community, man, the gossip chain is whoa, yeah,
it's out of control, and especially if you live on a compound together. Mm-hmm. My husband grew up in Montana on a compound, and that's where Robin grew up, and that's where her brothers. And so there's a lot of people
What
that know.
What does your husband think of Robin?
I can't say that out loud, but. There's a whole lot of lack of respect there. So, and really what she's done in that family is no different than his experience of her growing up. So
enough said. Well, we will be in touch. Thank you to everybody who joined. Punk Rock, we'll set something up. Yeah. And here we go, plowing into season 18.
Right. So thank you so much for having me on here too, because I feel like I've been following all you creators for quite a while, and then Punk Rock and I talk, frequently. And so I keep getting told, you need to speak out more. And so I haven't made a huge effort to grow my channel.
Yeah.
And so I just do little drops when I can.
Sure.
But it is something that I'm getting more and more push.
Well, I'm going to schedule with Punk Rock next if he'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I was going to call him too and say, hey, you want to go live? I've gone on a couple of his lives. He didn't know it was me when I first did it. And I asked him all of these questions and he answered them so amazingly well. But I answered them knowing what the answer was, or asked the question knowing what the answer was, because I just heard it from my dad, like maybe the day before. So kind of duped him a little bit there. It was sweet. He was funny, but great guy. Absolutely love him.
Yeah, me too.
So thank you so much.
He's like, really? You did that?
Yeah, I did. I haven't even told you about it. Yeah, it was a live that he was doing. And it was, I can't remember. My husband and I were both sitting there. And my husband's like, oh, ask this question. And we knew the answers because my dad had just been to my house the night before and had told us all of the scoop. And so I started asking some of that. And
that is amazing.
Yeah. But
that's funny.
Oh, there's my husband right there.
Oh, the user one?
No, he's commenting on here. Your husband likes Robin Hood and all of her merry men.
I see you. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll have to interview him. Oh, gosh. There you go.
Well, and that's what I told him. So we're actually probably going to do a series here pretty quick where he comes onto it with me. So.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, because he has the best sense of humor. That's why I was gonna.
That's why I would love to hear. That's why I want to talk to Punk Rock. Like, I would love to hear from a male's perspective,
right?
The whole thing, because I think it's very different, and we often hear from the women, and we don't hear from the men.
Well, and that's what I told him. I said, yeah, definitely, because I wondered why did his brothers, like he's got a lot of brothers. His mom had 7 boys just herself.
Wow.
And I'm like, how do you think your family got out of polygamy like this? And you don't have the complete level mental messed upness that so many other people have. Yeah. And really, I concluded it's because they have a good sense of humor. And too many times people come out of religion with no sense of humor. They can't laugh at themselves. They can't, can't objectively look at things and go, come on.
Yeah.
And so where my husband's family is very much that way. They have a very good sense of humor and they can objectively and make fun of themselves. And so that's where, Lady Amy needs to her own channel. Yeah. I actually grew up with her too. And I love her. She's such a sweetheart.
I do too. And we have a hard time getting her on.
Yeah. She's amazing. She was so quiet growing up. So I'm not surprised that she doesn't get on there. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, you have a great Saturday. This has been absolutely delightful, and I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let's stay contact and let's see how this season goes. Okay. You have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.